Alright guys, welcome back to Rex to Rides. Got my phony YouTube voice on, and as you can see, we've done quite extensive work. Not that extensive because it hasn't been very rusted, but work on the chassis, just a liner covering to make sure that down the line it doesn't rust. But apparently these things were made in PE, so they were very, very, I mean, it's just 40 years old and it's looking spick and span. And here we get to the unglamorous yet interesting bit of doing a rebuild. I mean, there you see your cab, and there we've got our low bin, and you know, you're going to think when you're doing a project that it's going to be all about paintwork and making it look great, and you kind of forget about the essentials. So guys that want to tackle these projects, they normally just end up never getting finished because they'd run into roadblocks all over the show. And it's not that they can't, it's just that sometimes they just get a little bit confused with all the terminology and what are these guys talking about. And you know, so this is why I try to keep things very, very basic and very explanatory, so you can understand what happens when you start to read the service book and find out what's going on and how to do these things yourself. It's not a rocket science, really. This thing just consists of nuts and bolts and confidence. That's all it is. So today, having done the chassis, fuel tank we're going to send in just to get restored. And there's nothing really wrong with it, but it can't hurt. There might be a bit of rust on the inside. It has been standing for a while. This prop shaft is down the line. We'll get that done. But today we're going to look at the differential. And what the differential basically does is it takes the power from the motor and it transfers it across to the axis of the axle and drives the wheels, in a nutshell. They can get very complicated because when your car takes a corner, your outer wheel has to turn faster than the inner wheel. Otherwise, you're going to get the wheels dragging and you'll hear the skidding and all sorts. So it can become a bit complex, but also it doesn't have to be that complex. So when you've got the vehicle like this, with the low bin off, it's ridiculous not to look at the oil that sits inside the differential. So yes, we've given it a pressure wash, as you can see. So there's a bit of surface rust on the cover, which is fine. Now, just to sort of get into it, when you're doing a rebuild, the first thing you really want to do is get your hands on one of these, the Haynes manual. So you've got your repair manual because it's going to give you all the specifications that you're going to need to do this job yourself. And they often it gets a little bit confusing because they're talking about M6 and M8 and what bolts and foot-pounds and Newton meters. So we're just quickly going to go over that, and then we're going to start working on this. So the first thing you're going to need is knowledge, and the next thing you're going to need is some tools. Now, on the knowledge side of things, with your differentials, a lot of differentials, they've got two plugs. This top one is the one to fill it, and then there's one underneath that you use to drain it. If you have such a differential, what you don't want to do when you are draining the gear oil inside, what you really don't want to do is your temptation is to take off the bottom plug first, so you can start draining the diff oil. And then you can get to the top plug, which isn't sitting in oil the whole time and can be quite difficult to remove. Then you find yourself in a bit of a spot because you've now drained the oil, but you can't get oil back in because you can't get that off, and you end up stripping it and you have to take it to a shop, and that's a bit of a problem. So what you want to do is make sure that your top plug is loose first and then remove the bottom plug, so you're quite confident that you can actually fill it, because that's, relatively important. The next thing I want to do is talk about threads and thread sizes. So bolts, threads, and thread sizes. So when we get to the manual, this is quite nice because they have a generic torque specifications. Now, your torque specifications are basically how tight do you make this bolt anywhere that goes in anywhere, so you don't strip it. So what we do is we refer to the manual. And what we need to know, because on this one, it actually has been seeping a bit around the corners. So I'm going to take this whole cover off. So I need to get it back on, and I need to make sure that it's the correct tightness. Otherwise, if I strip one of these, I'm just sitting with a massive problem that I'm going to have to fix with inserts and all sorts. Now, remember, this thing sits under your load bin. It gets covered in mud and all sorts of cock. And what's going to happen then is you're never going to see if it's leaking. And this is why we want to get the job done properly. You know, don't be scared off with all these specs and everything. They're really not that difficult. So we are going to spend a bit of time on that before we continue. So the first thing with this, in your Haynes manual, is they give you your size of the torque specifications for generic bolts. What they also do is they give you specific torque specifications for something that's going to be a little different, like your spark plugs or whatever. So here it says differential check fill drain plugs is 60 foot-pounds. So we just need to remember that 60 foot-pounds, straight up, easy. And then we need to look at this, and it says an M8 bolt must be 19 to 28 Newton meters. I like to work in Newton meters. These are not going to be, some of them are metric, I've noticed, and some of them are imperial. So let's look at what they're saying here a little bit. We'll just put this camera in here. And we're back. So what they are saying here is an M6 bolt must be 9 to 12, an M8 is 19 to 28, an M10 is 34. So what does that M mean? What does the M mean? I mean, this is a very good start. What size bolts are we dealing with? Now, with your M, what they are basically talking about, the M stands for, interestingly enough, major diameter, which is the diameter, if we can do this, you're going to need one of these. There's no ways you're going to rebuild a car without a veneer. And this is just going to measure. It's from the outside thread of one side to the outside thread of the other side, and it's 8 millimeters. So we're working in metric, so this is an M8 bolt. Now this is one of the bolts I've taken off the diff, just to have a look at. And it is a little under 8, and which tells me that this is an imperial size. But we're not working imperial, so we are very close to 8 millimeters, so our torque is going to be 19 to 28. Another thing with these bolts is you get different types. You'll see that this is another bolt, has got a split washer on, and that split washer, which you can't really see, keeps it from coming loose. And this is a flanged bolt. Oops. As you can see, it's got a little lip there, and on the inside it's got little teeth that hold it in. Sometimes on more specific manuals, they're going to tell you it has a slightly different torque setting to tighten, but we're going to stick with the M8, which is 19 to 28. So we're going to do all the way to 28. We're going to stick with 28. So that's where our veneer comes in. And then you need one of these. It's like a little thing with teeth. And they measure the thread. So here I want to show you something. This is 1.25. That fits this metric bolt really nice and snug. So it's a 1.25 bolt with a 1.25 thread. So that's why when they talk about an M8 1.25 bolt, it's not the length, it is the thread. And you'll see this is also a so-called M8, close enough. But you'll see these teeth don't actually really fit any of these. So this is an imperial bolt. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this, you see, it's not really a snug fit. It's sort of 1.5, but it still rocks, and that doesn't really, but that fits nicely. Is if you get your bolts mixed up, and you may look at it at first glance, it looks the same. This bolt is not the same as this bolt. So it's very important to know that you keep all your bolts together. Don't just throw them all in a bucket. Put them in a bag so you know that you've got the correct bolt to put your diff cover back on. So this bolt we're going to chuck away. Well, put it back in the box. And this comes off the diff. So this is where you really, really need your manual, and you need these. Now, it's telling you on the M8 is 19 to 28. So what I quite like is a 3/8 of an inch, torque wrench. And on the one side, it's got foot-pounds, and on the other side, it's got Newton meters. So we're going to look at the Newton meters. It says 28. So when you're storing your torque wrench, always unlock it and keep it on the lowest value. So it actually tightens up as you twist it up. So we're going to set this, we'll tighten it up. You'll see there's the little numbers on the side. And we want 28. So that's actually 28 right there. Now that is how tight, but first what we do with the torque wrench, before we go all the way, we'll lock it in. We go sort of halfway down, and we'll lock it in place. Because this torque wrench has been sitting for quite some time, you want to get its mechanisms lubricated. So before you don't just go ahead and start using it. You want it on half the value, or a fraction of the value, and just do this a few times. I mean, you can put it on any nut and make sure that it's nicely, because it has lubrication here in the handle, and that lubricates the mechanism that does that clicking. And what you don't want to do is just use it straight up when it's dry, because it will give you an incorrect value. So get it nicely lubricated first. That should be sufficient. Here's our bolt from here. We unlock it. I'm very fond of this little wrench. And we turn it right up until the naught is on that line, and 28. We lock it. So this is ready to get those back on. That we need there. Then we get, so we set to put that cover back on. That's our preparation done. We know that 28. We don't have to go when our hands are full of grease and go back, look at the book and figure out what's going on, what. Then we start looking at the diff. Now some diffs, let's have a look down here, actually have two plugs. Like I said, this one only has one. So what we've done is we've gone to find the correct socket for this, which is a 30. There's no drainage. So that's there. Our driver's ready to get it off. And then we go back to our manual. And like I said, it's really nice to get these things, get yourself ready for the job. Make sure you got all the sockets, that you're not struggling later on. So we're going to go back to our book. We don't need these anymore. And we're going to go here where it says our differential check full drain plug, which is 60, but it's 60 foot-pounds. So now we need our bigger torque wrench, because that's the little one. And that is, that will not go up to 60 foot-pounds. What is 60 foot-pounds in Newton meters? We look at our chart. Here it says foot-pounds. all the way down to 60. 60 foot-pounds is 81.36 Newton meters. And it's obviously got bold around here. So it's just a conversion chart here. So 81.36. So again, we've stored this on the lowest. So we don't want to go all the way up to 81 just yet. Again, we turn it in. And we want to get this thing lubricated. Wheel nuts are quite I like to have the handle down because you can sometimes see when it's been in storage a bit of the lubrication coming up. And there we go. Now this is 81.36, let's call it 82. But there it says 84. So, well, you can't see it's out of focus. So we turn it up to 84. So the 0 is on the center line, and the line of 84 comes down there. 84 less 2 is 82. So we go 81, 82, and then we lock it in place. So now we are ready to put that plug back on. And we take that off. And that's it. That sort of, you know, I think you'll start to see two reasons why we want this done like this. This is the correct way. This is the way the engineers have designed this vehicle. And that's sort of how you want to do all your restorations, is to the book. So first off, you'll need the book. Second off, you'll need the equipment. It's not tremendously expensive, but you do want to do it right. And trust me, when you take this thing to a shop, you cannot always be certain that they're going to go to these lengths to make sure that it's done right. So what you really want to do is do it yourself. Take the time. Take this one job in the morning and let's see how it goes. And yeah, without further ado, I think let's get on with it. So what I'm going to do first is get off this plug. So we don't need the torque wrench to get it off. We can just use a standard socket. And make sure you've got a plastic container underneath. Now, you do want a socket that's going to fit snug on it. You don't want to get it off with an open-end spanner because we don't know how tight this is. And that's it. Don't use a jerking motion. Don't use an impact driver. Just a good, even amount of pressure. So that's what you would want to crack first off. If you had 2 bolts, it's the top one. Just make sure it can come loose, and then you get the bottom one. Another thing is if you have a drain and a separate drain, separate drill full plug, is to be aware that they may look the same, but often on some vehicles the drain plug has got a magnet built in, so you don't really want to get them switched around. And let's get this off. I'm going to keep my hand underneath there. So here we have our drain and full plug. And the oil in there, I got to tell you, actually looks and smells quite good. That smells like manual transmission fluid. It's a very distinctive smell. Now, the way to get, I'm actually just going to leave that in here. I want that to get nicely lubricated. The way to get the oil out of this, there's specific oil suction plugs and all sorts of interesting different ways to do it. What you can do, get yourself a syringe and a bit of tube. Pop the tube in there, because this is a suction type, and slowly, but you really want to do it slowly. pull up the plunger and you'll see oil will start to come out. You don't really want to cut this tube. So when you get to that point, you're going to find that, oops, we need a bit more suction. So you can just pinch it off, take it off. That's why you don't want to cut the tube. And we start again. So this car's been sitting for a while. And I'm not sure if you can see on the camera the color of what's coming out there. It's a little bit different to what we first saw when we stuck our finger in there. Right, I'm just going to switch. Right, and we are back. And what you can see is I'm going to try and get some light on this. The car had been sitting for a very long time, and so everything had settled in the diff here. And because we have it on the suction, the pipe's at the bottom, and the oil that was on the top, it looked clean. In fact, it looked great. And we thought, that looks fantastic. You know, compare this clean oil to what's now coming out there. I don't know if you can look at that, but that is rancid. That's really bad. But none of it is the end of the world, because our plan was, we have had seepage here, is to take the whole cover off. It's actually gotten to a point where it's hardly sucking anymore. So what we're going to do is lift these tabs very carefully, because what you don't want to do is use the aluminium brake line as a fulcrum, but we do need to just get out this. Get the brake lines out the way. That'll come out nicely. And slightly move them back, remove the cover, see what comes out of here. Let's go for it. And there you have it. Let's take a look at what's going on here. And I could be mistaken. Let's keep it in there, but looking at that, oil is not great. Could well be water in the oil, could just be dirt, could just be used oil. So, but nonetheless, this thing works all the time. So you can see the importance of changing the oil. You don't always have to. You don't have to change the actual sump cover or differential cover, unless of course it is seeping and leaking, because you need that oil in the whole time. But in general, the gears and that, it's a very simple diff. They look pretty clean cut, and there's no bits and chips missing off them, so that's all good. So what we're going to do is get ourselves some gasket material, cut a gasket out of it, and make a new gasket. Spray this out with a bit of paraffin. Paraffin's great to get in here, just to get the most of the skunk out, and then reassemble. So let's go shopping. Okay, so we've got everything nicely cleaned out. What we were spraying earlier was a little bit of paraffin in there, and cleaning out with a brush, some sanding, A little bit of 400 paper over the flange there. And over here, we've got a bit of engine enamel on. And nicely cleaned up and ready to go on. So we've got us some gasket material. Also something I've actually never done before is cut a gasket, but let's see how it goes. Alright guys, now that we've got our gasket cut and clearly marked, we have marked it so that the brake line goes there and that fits on that way. Hope you can all see. So we know that that goes on like that way round, because that's how we cut it. And so before we do anything, what we need to do is get everything clean. And that's why I like to use, for this, acetone. We have cleaned out the inside of the differential with some paraffin. And obviously it is going to be a bit running down the bottom here. But that's the bit we're going to clean last. So there's no drops. What we're first going to do, a bit of engine enamel on that. Looking good. Give it a good run with some acetone. And that will dry almost instantly, leaving very little residue. And we're ready to go on that. And we've got our gasket orientated. Or have we? Yes, we have now. And we are ready to go. Our gasket alone should hold this and shouldn't leak. And there's lots of things you can use. There's a lot of products on the market. I've seen red ATV. So the bottom bit of this, obviously, we're going to do last. So it's not to just smear grease around or paraffin or oil. It's got a little bit in. You stop any running down. What I like to do with gaskets, just a couple of things on gaskets. Yes, I know with the KDX, my old 86 KDX, and it said what you can do is you can also use, if you're in a pinch, in the bush somewhere and a gasket's gone or something, you can use a cereal box, because that's pretty much what it is a piece of cereal box. What I like to do is on both sides, this stuff is the best. This is not a product placement. This is just, the stuff literally sticks like shit to the blanket. And I've even used it for gutters. When it's raining, and you can get a little bit dry, so this is going to be a bit out of your vision. And I've actually stuck this on a steel gutter, and it stopped the water immediately from going into the house, because there was a slight rust patch. And it will sort of waterproof you short term until the rain stops and you can go over the steel gully correctly when it's a bit drier. But in a pinch, you should always have a bit of this in your car if you're doing long distances in the bush or wherever. This is the greatest stuff on the market, and I'm quite generous with it. I know it is expensive, but like I said, this is not a part you look at often. This is a part that, if it leaks, it's going to leave you in the lurch. So you don't want that. What you also don't want is gaps in between. So this looks a bit messy, but it's just the excess is going to come out the side. What you don't want is a sort of miss a spot there because you want it to torque up quite evenly over the whole thing. Here you can see where the little tab for the brake line was spot welded on. So that gives us a good orientation. Now, we have marked it that way up with a brake on top. And we are kind of there. And I'm going to just give it a gentle massage on. Yeah, I kind of think that it's going to be easier this way than trying to get your Reassembly on the gasket, line it up and all that. It's probably going to be easier to get it on the cover first. Like I said, you don't have to use Reassembly. I did a sump on a W136 Mercedes, and they said you need to use this. There's no gasket for that sump. Very thin flange. It was about 3/8 of an inch. And that car never leaked oil afterwards. And since that day, Reassembly was my go-to. So their holes pretty much line up. Our bolts are not ready, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. And I'll give you a turny thing in the tube. So we're going to see if we can use that little puppy to turn it. That's what that's for. Yep. You got to get a bit. That's why I don't stick it on immediately. Yeah, at least not one knot. Maybe we should supposed to turn it the other way. Ha! What do you know? No, that's also not. Oh, wait. There you go. So that's ready to pop on. And again, because we might have got a leak, though it's pretty dry. Now it's smashing my head open on the chassis. At least it's been waterproofed so it won't rust. Just go over that bit again. Acetone dries almost immediately. And if you're in a pinch, you just use your wife's nail polish remover. Though again, that will probably make you a little bit unpopular. And so for the duration of this process, just imagine there's some background music playing. So you want to bead around there and get the bead around the bolts. I've got to say, you don't want to go too close to this edge, because not that it's really going to be a big problem, but you don't want too much excess going into the inside when you can rather have it go to the outside. But we are quite liberal with the amount we're using here, so don't imagine there's going to be any bits of Reassembly, or not any bits of flange that are not covered with this stuff. This is really amazing. I use it. I have a lot of uses for this. So generally on a new application as important like this, I'm going to open a new tube, and whatever's left over stays in the car. That if we just need to do a quick waterproof repair somewhere, we are there. Okay, so we're actually ready to get this on. But like I said, we're not really ready. That gets just a little screw. That's going to solidify, but we keep the cap so that we can just at a later stage. I'll tell you why. There's one more trick here. Now, sometimes in your specifications, when you look at your specs like we did earlier, and they talk about putting bolts in, you see that's got rust on it. And when you put it in, that rust will cause a bit of friction, and you won't always get an accurate torque on it. So sometimes they'll talk about lubricated, and sometimes they'll talk about locked. And what that basically is you want a bolt to be lubricated going in. So when it's lubricated, it's not going to get stuck. It's not going to give you a false torque. It's going to be the genuine torque, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So a lot of guys say, no, don't lubricate, especially your wheel lug nuts. You don't lubricate them so that they won't rust on. You lubricate them so you get them to the correct torque, because it's going to turn relatively easy until you want it to stop turning, which is when your torque wrench tells you it's time to stop turning. So that's why we pop a bit of this on. This is copper slip. That's grease that's got little copper molecules on. And that gives it that, let's just put the lid on there straight. And we are ready to go. So what we want to do first is orientate ourselves, make sure it's on. And we're going to get our first bolt in. And it's going to be this one. And that is just a position. Cheers, Anna. Cheers, Thomas. Dankie, man. Sien jou nog 'n dag. Just to position it. Now, we get one diagonally. They always talk about, for you guys doing your own project, they talk about star patterns and diagonally. Basically, you're going 1, 2, then you come across to this one, 3. And I got to tell you, there are some really, really interesting patterns that you get on more advanced motors, where when they're building it, they actually put a stencil over it. It's got all the numbers that you have to do. It goes up to 34. But this is a differential on an 84 Isuzu KB 2000. I think we can just go with a regular pattern. So we're going one across, one across. We're doing this to make sure it pulls up evenly. Now, with this one, we didn't massage it in. You may have noticed that. That's because this thing would have gone skew. We'd have lost the holes, and it had been a total dog show after that. And you can see our bolts are going in nicely. And never forget there's one at the bottom. There's always one. So we want this to go on evenly as possible. So first we're going to do it finger tight. You can see now we're just going straight back. If you go to there, and yes, it's not the end of the world, because we have a mild steel cover going onto a cast iron bit of kit, really. If it were two cast iron bits going onto each other, then it would be very important. Very slowly, but mild steel is quite flexible. We want them all uniformly finger tight. So this is just no place for a torque wrench. Just don't. Whatever you do, don't. Now we're just going to snug it. And you'll find that as it snugs up, the other ones are. I've lost my way. I seem to have completely lost my way. This is what project cars do to you. So let's start again. You're really going by feel. They're not tight. We jump basically just using the weight of this ratchet. It's one of my favorite ratchets. Lost my way again. Right, now let's just check how even we are. Yeah, we put a brake line here. Obviously, don't put this on upside down because that's your fill line. And you see how much looser they become as this thing goes on. So we remember our torque settings for the M8 bolts that we are using here. And it's got a lock. So now we don't have to torque this one up to spec all the way first. We can just keep turning it. We are still trying to maintain that star pattern. We've done 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to move to this one. We're going to move to the one in the middle. Notice how we're just doing a little bit quarter of a turn. We can go a bit more on that. And then these two. Seems as if I found my way again. So we've had to do extra turns because it's pulling up tighter. And that's what we want. We are still set to 28 Newton meters. Yeah, that. We heard the first click. That, yeah. Oh. So you can sort of start to see why you're not doing it all in one go. We've done there. Have we done? We haven't done here. And so is that last one. Now what I like to do, everything has gone up to torque. We've heard the click. And it had a range for something to 15 to 28 Newton meters. So I'm just going to go around like this because it has now pulled up evenly to make sure we've got them all. Yeah, click. So we've gone over. Now, a lot of you guys are going to say, what is torque? What is a torque wrench? We've gone over how to set a torque wrench. We've gone over, but we haven't gone over is how does this work? So it would say foot-pounds or kilograms per meter or newtons per meter. So let's put it all into metric. The amount of twist that we are going to exert on this bolt for it to be as tight as they want it, the manufacturers first designed it, let's say in kilograms per meter or kilogram meter. It means if this handle was 1 meter long and you put 1 kilogram on here till it clicked, that is 1 kilogram meter. This is Newton meters. So let's go back to the kilogram per meter. So that would mean that this handle would have to be a meter long and you put 1 kilogram on there. But they're not all that long. Some of them are shorter. So if this was 500 millimeters or half a meter, it's half the distance, you would have to put 2 kilograms on here. And if it's a quarter of the distance, you'd have to put 4. So if this was 250 mils from the center to there, it means you would have to put 4 kilograms on there over 250 millimeters to make it 1 kilogram per meter. Also, foot-pounds just means over a foot you put 1 pound of pressure, or 1 pound exertion, weight, whatever you want to call it. That's why I'm holding it like this, because it isn't going to work like that to explain it. So that's all a torque wrench is doing. It's telling you when you've put the right amount of pressure on here for that specific bolt. So again, we are just going to, and I do like to just see it turn that last little bit. Now, Rinser also has very comprehensive instructions on the box. And it tells you if your seal is so many millimeters thick, you need to leave it for so many hours at X amount of temperature. I'm just going to leave that for 24 hours. We're going to leave that for 24 hours for it all to dry. We're not going to try and wipe off excess or anything here. We're just going to get the copper slip off there, so that our our diff looks nice and nicely done up, and it looks like we've done a pretty grand job there. That's all torqued up. We can pop these back on. I'm going to press that with something that is going to result in me scratching the engine enamel that I've sprayed on here. So I think a pair of water pump pliers will do that nicely. Check this out, I got it at auction. You can get one of your granddad's good old water pump pliers like this, and you want to keep that because they don't make them like they used to. Well, sure are brake lines that we could probably have done that before, and that everything is back in place. That's probably the same size bolt, so we'll just torque that up to spec also. And this is why you want to spend some money on a service manual, because the service manual is going to give you all these specifications and explain everything to you, so you can do your vehicle just exactly like the manufacturer intended, and not have to get someone else to come and do your project for you. That's why we're tightening up, This is the thing about projects, is you don't want to do the whole that slipped a bit. That's because it's a 12, it's not a 13. You really don't want to race. That's it. You don't want to race through these things. That's all you want to get done. Is let's get so I've left that in there. Very, very specific reason. Just to make sure it remains nicely, the best lubricated as possible. Now, again, we've got the torque setting for this. We're not going to tighten it. It does look like it has an aluminium washer, but we want to be very careful with this, because it only has, the metal is just bent in. There's not a whole nut on the inside. So we do not want to over tighten that. But I'm going to leave that overnight till tomorrow. What is quite nice about this is manual transmission fluid, or the basic good old-fashioned MTF, has a very distinctive smell. So I know exactly what needs to go in here. So we'll just get some manual transmission fluid, fill it up, and then we're ready to go on with the next step of the project. But like I was saying about projects, you can consider, you don't try to do the whole thing in one day. Just do one thing at a time. But when you do it, finish it. Because a project is all it consists of is a set of tasks. A task is to redo the springs. A task is to replace a shock. A task is to service the diff. A task is to do the brakes, hubs. Do them one at a time. Because when you try to tackle the whole thing, you do a little bit here and a little bit there, and you never get the project finished. So one bite at a time. We'll let that dry. So guys, please like and subscribe. And tomorrow we'll be filling that up. And then that's it. Job done. Alright guys, so here we are 2 days later. And I think that's ample time to let the Rangers all set and cure, and the gaskets on, and everything looks great. Remember, we put this on finger tight. We need to just be aware that it's not a separate thread. This is actually part of the housing that's just been pushed in, and so there's not a lot of thread in there. So we need to bear that in mind. We want to look at the aluminium washer. It looks okay. We probably should replace it, but we don't have one. But it looks great. It'll be okay. And what I've done is I've taken a little funnel, a piece of pipe, and the plan is we want to top it up until it overflows. So get yourself some newspaper down. We've got some 80, 90 gear oil, which is what they specified. And all that's left is to just, I didn't really think this through, did I? I could have made that pipe a bit longer, but here we are. Let's slowly start filling it. So far so good. It is a lot thicker oil, so it will take some time. Especially to get through the funnel. Normally you buy these in a bottle with a little extendable nozzle that can go in. But yeah, there's also ways to pump it in, but you can also spend a fortune on equipment, but you don't really need just a little bit of patience. So let's get this filled in and see how it goes. Right, so what we've done is we've filled it up. What I have also done is put the vehicle on jack stands so I can turn the wheels. If you'll recall, it's also neutral. We also have some chocks on the front wheels. If you recall, it's been sitting dry really for 2 days, so I just want to make sure we get everything lubricated and get everything turned around. It's taken a little bit off the level, as it would do. Let's just keep going. And if your vehicle is in common use, you probably don't need to do this, but it's going to be a while before this drives, so let's just make sure there's a coating, good coating of oil on everything. I can physically see, but if your load bin's on, you probably won't be able to see. So I'm just going to add a splash more than a splash, a lot more, to just be sure. It's probably also not a job you want to do in summer, because these mosquitoes are going to get you while you're holding this little funnel up. It's very annoying. It'd be better to just do it in winter. Okay, and that kind of covers that. We're up to the top, it's overflowing, and that's how you know a gearbox or a differential is full. We're going to get a finger tight. We've got our torque wrench out set to 60 foot-pounds, 80 Newton meters as the manual says, and we really want to do this slowly. Hoping it doesn't go righty-loosey before it goes click. I'm actually just going to leave it right there, and having looked at the thread, and my gut is telling me if we tighten it anymore, we are going to have a righty-loosey situation, and then, oh God, then we are welding on all sorts of issues. So we'll give that a wipe, and just keep an eye on it, and that's it really. Is our differential oil has been replaced. So thanks for following. I know it's a very long video, but I do appreciate your views. So please like and subscribe. As I say, we need subscribers to make the money for the bulbs. Guys, thanks for viewing. Stay tuned for the next one.